Hi guys, so today we have a special episode for you. I wanted to talk about stories of women by women in honor of Women's Month, right? So happy International Women's Day / month to everyone out there. So this is the appropriate time to share with you some of the books that I really enjoyed and that really resonated with me. And these books were written by women. There are so many, and there's such a rich and diverse stories coming from different voices from different women, right? But I'm going to share with you about 5 to 6 books today that I've read in the past 2 years or so, and I hope you enjoy it. So let's get started. First up is Trick Mirror by Tolentino, and this one is really special for me. This was published in 2019, and this is extra special for me because Tolentino is actually a Filipina like me, and I super enjoyed her book. This is not a memoir. This is basically a few or several of her essays about topics that are really important to her, or topics that that she felt like she have something to share about, and I'm glad she did. This is absolutely a gem of a book. She writes brilliantly. Her insights are incredible. She is intelligent, very intellectual book, a very cerebral book. Actually, was the first word that came to my mind when I read this book. And just to give you like a sneak peek of what it is, she talks about or she gives insights about her childhood, about religion, about feminism, about what's it like to grow up as a millennial and in a time like this, and what are the economic climate at the time that they were growing up. She talked about a lot of scams that happened in the U.S. In the recent decade, which I thought was very interesting, and which I thought was very insightful as well. She talked about religion. I think I already mentioned that, but she also talked about reality TV. She talked about how social media influences us now and how we kind of depend on it as well, and how it changes our views or influences our views about certain important topics, right? So she really talks about so many things here, and I thought her ideas were quite fresh and original. Some of it are most of it actually are new ideas, and I had a few aha moments myself after reading her, and I thought that she is a very, very smart lady. And I would encourage you to read this. Granted, I wouldn't say that this is an easy read. I don't think it's an easy read, but that makes it worth it, right? This book demands your commitment and your attention. And if you find yourself having difficulty reading the first few essays or few pages, it's fine. Give it a rest and then come back to it, and I promise you it's going to be worth it. Her insights are incredible, and this is just some of her views about life, right? She is a Filipina, but I think she lives in New York now, and I guess her upbringing in the States, of course, would have influenced some of her views as well. And another topic that she talked about also, I think she also mentioned a little about sexual abuse in here. So really very hard-hitting, relevant topics, right? I really do encourage you to read it, just so you get a taste of a different perspective about relevant topics from a women's perspective. Okay, so that's the first book that I wanted to share. The second one is this one is a memoir, Notes on the Silencing by Lacy Crawford. I think this was published in 2020, so it's very recent and very fresh. Yeah, 2020. And this one is a serious topic, right? So Lacy shares about her sexual abuse back when she was still, I think, 14 or 15 years old in a private school in the States, in the US. And she talks about it only about, I don't know, 20 years later. And I thought this was incredibly brave of her to share her story even after, even decades later. And it was such a, for me, it was a difficult read because it's of course it's a difficult topic as it is, but it's a difficult read because she really shared her struggle in when she was in still in school. She was just trying to finish her study. She was just trying to, lead a normal life. But then circumstances happened to her. These things that she never thought would actually happen to her, and it did. And it seemed at the time that it was a normal almost occurrence, and the school even tried to hide it, and tried to get away with it, and they almost did. Well, I should correct that. They did until, the parents in some other cases came to light. So this is one of the books that I thought was has a strong perspective and has a strong voice, a voice that really needs to be heard. And I'm glad that she shared it, albeit it's a very difficult memoir. But her having the courage to speak out at last, I thought was very important. And it's just, these types of stories just reminds us that, these things happen, and we should listen to it, we should hear it, we should acknowledge it, and it's not easy. So yeah, and I thought this is a powerful book. Yeah, so give it a try. A serious topic for sure, but I thought it was a good book. Okay, another powerful book. This one is called I Was Told to Come Alone by Souad Mekhennet. This was published way back in let me see. This was published way back in 2017. So maybe it's not too far back, yeah? So Souad Mekhennet is a journalist. She is a brilliant, brave, courageous journalist who wrote about, as her title says, her journey behind the lines of Jihad. And I thought it was incredibly brave of her to go into high risk, even behind enemy lines situations, just so she could share the truth and the story that needs to be told from both perspective, from the Western perspective, but also from the East or Middle East perspective. It is not an easy story to tell because it's almost polarizing at some point. These are very serious political, religious topics that are polarizing, right? But after reading her and really just appreciating her courage into going to these situations and risking life and limb just so she could tell the stories, the truth behind all the news that we see, and trying to shed a little more light into things that we think we know because we've read it somewhere in the social media or in the internet or whatever. It gives you a deeper insight into what you think you know. So I would encourage you to read this. Have an open mind when you're reading it and try to see her point of view as well, because she has a unique point of view because she grew up in Germany, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, she grew up in Germany, but she's not German, right? She is of Middle Eastern descent, and that blend gives her that credibility, that authenticity to write from both perspectives. And I thought that was her strength, and I thought that actually gave her courage also. So she wrote about ISIS, she wrote about Arab Spring, she wrote about the war, and it's all in here. Covers about 10 to 15 years of her journalistic life. So it's quite brilliant. Do give it a shot. I don't know though how many copies are out there. This is actually a rare find for me, but I'm sure Amazon has it somewhere. But you can find it, but it's a good book. So give it a try. Okay? So the last few books that I wanted to talk about are all memoirs. I'm gonna start with The Glass Castle by Jeanette, published in 2005. So it's quite a while back, but I promise you, it's still worth the read. I think there is a movie of the same title, if I'm not mistaken, and it's a brilliant memoir of Jeanette. She grew up in an unorthodox, strange and difficult family in childhood, and what I liked about her story, what I admire about her, is that she really fought to have a normal life. she had to recognize that she needed to get out of her difficult family in order to live the life that she wanted, because she wanted to better her life. She wanted to have a better, version of herself. And it was a difficult decision for her because she loved her family. She loved her family, her father so much, but she also knew that it's a vicious cycle. She needed to get out of it in order to be better, but at the same time, she didn't want to leave her family because she loves them. And I thought that was incredibly brave of her to have made that decision, and she did. And it's a very, for me, I remember reading this book, and I remember um, you know after reading it, I remember that this book impacted me on a more personal level, because in some cases I can relate to her, not her, not exactly her exact experience, right? But the way she described her emotions going through some of her childhood memories, that part I could relate, because she had a dysfunctional family, and I think all of us has a dysfunctional family on some form. And after reading her, it made me think about my memories of my own family, and I thought, you know, you need to document these things, and you need to kind of remember where you came from, and kind of appreciate also, how you got from there, to now, right? So it's a powerful book. It's a powerful sharing. So give it a try. And then I'm gonna follow that up with another book, another memoir. I mean, it is Educated by Tara Westover. Another brilliant memoir, another must read. This is in practically everything, all the bestseller lists that you will see in the bookstores and online. And this is also a must read for me. This is one of my top books to read in 2020, and I'm sure same with everybody else. And the reason for that is because she is absolutely brilliant. Similar to Jeanette Wall's The Glass Castle, they actually do have similarities. Tara also grew up in a strange, unorthodox, and difficult family. And similar to Jeanette, she knew that in order to have a better life for herself, and in order to have a normal life for herself, she needed to leave her family. And she did. And now I believe she's a professor, or a Harvard fellow, I think. And that just goes to show, the perseverance and the tenacity of wanting to better one's life, right? And I thought Jeanette Walls and Tara Westover stories were inspiring and quite brilliant, because they just show you that, even in their type of situation wherein they have certain disadvantages in life, but they still manage to live the life that they want, albeit with consequences, right? They had to leave their family essentially, but I thought it was still a good turn of events, because leaving leaving their family did not mean that they stopped loving them, or they ceased loving their family. I don't think so. And there should be nothing wrong with wanting to go out there and live a different life from what their family wanted them to. And that doesn't make them a bad person, right? That doesn't make them wrong. It just makes them different, and that should be okay. And I thought that was the brilliant message of the book. There are certain things that you do, and there will be consequences about it, and there will be impact, but it doesn't mean it's wrong. It doesn't mean it's incorrect. And living the life that you want should not be something that should be taken against you. And I really I really enjoyed their stories, and I thought they were amazing and inspiring, and almost fictional. Really, it's you just couldn't believe that these events actually happened to them, and it kind of broadens your mind and your perspective about the kind of life that you the reader has, because it's so different from them. So you almost think like it's fantastical almost, but again, these are the type of things that you should be reading, or everybody should read about, and everybody should listen to, because these are real stories of real women. So yeah, the last book I wanted to share with you is, this one is pretty fresh. I think published in 2020 lang din. Untamed by Glennon Doyle. Let me check. I think 2020. Just want to be just want to make sure. Okay. So it was published in 2020. Another one in the bestseller list, I think. This one is really, the word that I described it after reading it was empowering. It's a very different story, very original, refreshing story, I thought. And Glennon Doyle is I think she's very well known or quite known in the US. And her story here, basically, she shared her journey of becoming, of really finding her true self and finding the real love of her life. And it just so happens that the love of her life is also a woman. So she's a married woman, and then I think she has kids. Yeah, she has kids. And later on, she in the book she shared that she always felt strange and kind of unsure about certain things about herself until finally she met the love of her life, and then that's when she started to really acknowledge that part of herself, and now she's married to her. Um, she's married to her love of her life, and I thought that was incredibly brave of her in sharing her truth finally, and accepting her truth about herself and loving every piece of it, right? I enjoyed her book because it's so positive. By the way, she wrote it in a very positive tone, in a very inspiring, like I said, in very empowering tone. So it's a light read, and I thought it was a happy read actually. Yeah, so I enjoyed that too. So do give it a shot, and that's it actually. Those are the books that I wanted to share with you. And like I mentioned, granted, there are so many great stories of women by women out there, such a diverse and rich stories that you could find. I hope the 6 books that I share with you somehow inspires you to read more about women and more about stories that are written by women. So all these memoirs are really very special. Glass Castle by Jeanette and The Educated by Tara Westover is really just about trying to find oneself and trying to find the courage to even go against one's family, to pursue a better life. And again, the message is this: it should not be viewed as something wrong, and it does not mean that you stop loving your family when you do that, because you never do. And then Untamed by Glennon Doyle is really finding about yourself, finding your true self, and accepting your true self and loving your true self. And I thought that was that was just a beautiful story actually. And then on a more serious note, you have Notes on the Silencing by Lacy Crawford, and this was really her courageous and powerful story, about her sharing about her sexual abuse case decades before. Actually, just a note on this. I just recently finished a fiction book called My Dark Vanessa, which talks about sexual abuse as well. And really, the thing that was a difficult read because it was told from the perspective of the abused, and from the perspective of the abuse, especially when you're a kid, like a 15, 14-year-old girl, you would not think it's abuse. You would actually, because you're so innocent, you didn't know what was happening to you. And it was the same for Lacy, and she only realized that like decades later. She only managed to acknowledge that that event that happened to her like 30, 20 years ago really had an effect on her life. So these are not easy stories, but they happen. So these are stories that we need to listen to, we need to acknowledge, and we need to talk about, really. Right? Another one, just to recap, is the I Was Told to Come Alone by Souad Mekhennet. Again, another series of stories actually by Souad, her journalistic life in the past 15, 20 years, and really just helps the reader broaden their perspective about the things that you hear and you think that you read from the news. What I realized, my insight after reading this book, is that we don't really know anything. You don't really know for sure what's happening out there in the world unless you're really there. especially in this day and age wherein information flows so quickly and so easily through social media and through the internet and through your friend and friend of friends. And you think you know, you think you've heard it all, but really, unless you are there yourself, you really don't know anything. And I don't mean that to say that don't read anything. Of course, do try to educate yourself as much as you can. Try to read as much as you can. But my learning here is that don't be too quick to judge. I think that's the main thing. Don't be too quick to judge, and try to listen from all perspectives and read from all perspectives. And this, I mean, that I think that practice can apply to anything and everything, right? To not just to serious topics, but to everyday life. I mean, you should not be too quick to judge about people and about stories that you hear. You just really have to step back, take a pause, and then see it from all angles, right? And last but not the least is Trick Mirror by Gia Tolentino. Again, I really enjoyed this. Such a smart girl. I know I said that 3 times, but really very clever, very intelligent, very original insights about feminism, religion, social media, reality TV, and all that. And she writes it and shares it with such wit. You know, she's very witty and smart and sharp, and I loved it. So do give it a shot. So again, I know, keep saying it again and again, but these are great stories of women written by women, and I encourage you to try them and read them and broaden your perspective and your horizon. So there you go. I hope that helps, and happy International Women's Month. Thanks, guys.